What if a product you used every day, a thing that was supposed to cure you no less, just suddenly started poisoning you? Something that was supposed to be so safe that even kids could take it?
Mom, Kathy's sick. Come on.
She has a fever. Please get the children's Tylenol.
Not aspirin?
Not anymore, because I found out children's Tylenol is the one more pediatricians give their own kids.
To bring down your child's fever fast, trust Children's Tylenol.
Vicks, Vapor Rub, Benadryl, or heaven forbid, Tylenol? That's exactly what happened in the 80s. Suddenly, people who took what is arguably the most common over-the-counter medication in the country started dropping dead after taking a single Tylenol tablet.
That bizarre mystery of Tylenol laced with cyanide still has not been solved tonight.
Investigators say they are searching for, quote, a madman.
The batches were different, the stores were random, and so were the victims. And as fast as the bodies piled up, just as quickly did the perpetrator just vanish along with one of the most terrifying crimes against the nation. Here's the story of the Tylenol murders. Let's get into it. I'm not gonna lie, this case has me shaken to my core. The idea that the entire stock of an everyday product can be rendered deadly overnight, and for it to be done so randomly, is a terrifying dystopian type idea that should only exist in movies. Yet that's exactly what happened on the morning of September the 29th, 1982. Patient zero was 12-year-old Mary Kellerman from Schaumburg, Illinois. She woke up in her Chicago suburb that morning with typical cold symptoms, so her father, Dennis, gave her an extra-strength Tylenol tablet while her mother, Gina, called the school to tell them that their daughter wasn't coming in. Just minutes later, Mary collapsed in the bathroom, convulsing on the floor. She was brain dead before the ambulance reached the hospital and declared dead less than 10 minutes after arrival. Just like that, a healthy 12-year-old with a mild flu, dead in just minutes. The home was searched, the parents investigated, and autopsy performed. I mean, a 12-year-old doesn't just drop dead for no reason, but police and medical professionals couldn't find any cause for little Mary's death. The Tylenol bottle was taken as evidence but wasn't immediately tested because Tylenol did not explain her sudden onset symptoms, and the bottle was brand new. Only one tablet had been taken out of it. So this clearly wasn't an overdose. Mary's death was chalked off to a cruel decision by nature, maybe an unknown heart defect or one of those random but tragic cases that nobody can explain. Hey, it just happens sometimes, you know? What they didn't know was that while they were performing the autopsy on Mary, just a few hours after she died, another household was about to experience the same thing, only this time, it was 10 times worse. The Janis family lived in Arlington Heights, just a 19-minute drive from the Kellermans. 27-year-old Adam Janis called in sick from his postal job that day. He, too, was coming down with a cold. While out picking up his kids from school, he stopped at a grocery store and picked up a steak for dinner, some flowers for his wife, Teresa, and a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol. After cooking up the steaks, he took 2 pills, and within minutes, the same thing happened to him that just happened to Mary. He started feeling so ill that he told Teresa that he needed to lie down, only to collapse on the floor as soon as the words were out of his mouth. Convulsions, minutes to brain death, and then his heart just gave out. For now, the district just had 2 relatively young cardiac arrests, and that was that. Unfortunate, but not concerning enough to raise the alarm, so no one connected the dots just yet. The Janis house was full that night with the mourning family. Before I get into who was present, let me clear up a confusing detail. Both Adam and his brother Stanley were married to women named Teresa. Yeah, I know. What are the odds? So inside that evening were Adam's wife, Teresa, the widow, Stanley, age 25, and his new wife, Teresa, aged just 19, Paula, who was Adam and Stanley's mother, and obviously Adam's children. At 5 p.m., when they got back from the hospital, a few of them had some pretty big headaches after crying so much, and the monumental stress of the day. Stanley and his wife, Teresa, each took 2 capsules from the same bottle that Adam had left on the kitchen counter just a few hours earlier. Stanley, who took the pills a few minutes before his wife did, dropped to the floor with violent convulsions. As paramedics tried to resuscitate him in the kitchen, his young wife collapsed on the floor right next to her dying husband and the bewildered paramedics. And here's where we finally get a stroke of luck for this horrendous set of back-to-back deaths. The same doctor who just pronounced Adam dead was still in the ER when the young couple were wheeled in. He was the first one who realized that something was very, very wrong here. Stanley was pronounced dead just minutes later, while Teresa was put on life support, barely hanging on. Poison control suggested that the rapid onset of symptoms looked a lot like cyanide. But what inside that home could contain the deadly substance? While they scrambled to keep Teresa alive and another team searched the home for contaminants, a firefighter on the other side of town also made some connections. He'd heard the 911 calls coming in from the Janus home, and his mother happened to mention that morning that her colleague's young daughter had died that same day of a mysterious and fast-acting condition that caused convulsions. Philip Capitelli made a call to his mother, somehow found out about the little girl taking Tylenol, and called the hospital, where he found out that the family had had steak, some peaches, coffee, and you guessed it, Tylenol. Capitelli called it in to the authorities in both hospitals, proving, without a doubt, that you need to speak up, no matter how insignificant, no matter how small the detail, even just a vague memory at the back of your mind. Pick up the phone and report it. If it weren't for Capitelli, who voiced a suspicion, and the doctor that already had poison control in the line of communication, who knows how long it would have been before they figured it out and how many more people would have died. At first, the bottles looked perfectly normal. No sign of the containers or the pills inside looked out of the ordinary at all, to the untrained eye at least. Upon closer inspection, the bottle in the Kellerman home and the one in the Janus home was sold at different stores, but they both had the same lot number, meaning that the bottles were part of the same batch made in the same facility. That factory was the Johnson & Johnson plant in Bridgeview, Illinois, and they both smelled like almonds. That's the most distinctive way to identify cyanide. It smells just like almonds. Cyanide was confirmed to be inside the Tylenol capsules with a quick test, and the victims had cyanide up to 1,000 times above the lethal amount in their systems. Also, after a few more hours in storage, the cyanide had begun to eat through the gelatin-based cover that the capsules are made of. Not all the capsules inside the bottles were laced with cyanide, however. Besides what the Janus family had consumed, only 4 of the 44 pills inside the bottle were laced with the poison. The capsules that were being dissolved were distinctive in other ways, you know, besides actively dissolving before the investigators' eyes, The contaminated capsules were slightly bigger than the others, and the powder inside was clumpy thanks to their reaction to the poison. If the user wasn't a chemist by trade, you'd never even notice the difference. That same day, before there was even time to warn the public, 2 more people died. Mary McFarland, age 31, and Mary Reiner, 27 years old. Reiner had just given birth to her 4th baby in Winfield, Illinois, 38 minutes from the Janus home. She took 2 extra-strength Tylenol just an hour after being released from the hospital. Less than 10 minutes later, she was in critical condition. She hung on until the next morning, but ultimately died at 9:30 on the 30th of September. McFarland was from Lombard County, 30 minutes from the Janus home. She got a headache while working the phones at the Yorktown Shopping Center, and you probably know where this is going. She took 2 extra-strength Tylenol. Same story, convulsions, brain death, and total organ failure. The next morning, on the 30th of September, Johnson & Johnson recalled all of the bottles from the lot that the Janus and Mary Kellerman's bottles came from, and for a second there, everyone thought the danger was over.
5 people are now dead, 1 in critical condition after taking extra-strength Tylenol. Bottles of the pills with the serial number MC2880 are being recalled.
The sheer amount of media coverage devoted to warning people in the areas where that lot number's products were delivered was so enormous that just about every household in Illinois was aware of the danger. Forensics started to swarm over the factory, sure that the bottles were contaminated at the source. Employees, delivery drivers, and even cleaners were interrogated. Every inch was swabbed, and the entire place was shut down. There was nothing, not a single trace of cyanide anywhere to be found. To make matters worse, the bottles that belonged to Mary Reiner and Mary McFarland were not from the same lot that the Janus and Kellermans had. So Johnson & Johnson called for a nationwide recall of 31 million bottles of Tylenol. Look, Johnson's & Johnson's have a lot of skeletons in their closets, mostly at the expense of human lives, but this case is not one of those skeletons. The company acted the second they learned about the contamination, losing millions in the process. They truly spared no expense to keep people safe, and they were extremely transparent with the public throughout all of it. Just about every home in the country was warned, and thousands of bottles were thrown in the trash, but one woman didn't get to see the news reports, the papers, headlines, or hear the radio in time. 35-year-old Paula Prince was a flight attendant that landed in Chicago on the evening of the 29th, the same day that all the other victims died, and while Teresa Janice lay fighting for her life in the ICU. She stopped by a Walgreens to get some groceries and an extra-strength Tylenol before a nationwide recall could take place. Only Paula lived alone, so her body wasn't found until the 1st of October.
The death of 35-year-old Paula Prince stunned her family and friends. Her body was discovered last night inside her apartment on Chicago's near North Side. Investigators say it appears she had collapsed into her closet. Her sister Carol Prince says she last talked with Paula on Wednesday. It is believed that Paula Prince took the Tylenol that killed her sometime Wednesday evening.
Paula was discovered on the same day that Teresa Janice was taken off life support, bringing the total number of deaths up to 7. Every single one of the 300 million recalled bottles were tested. 8 bottles were contaminated with cyanide. 5 belonged to the victims. 2 were found in homes after the buyers returned them, and 1 was still on a shelf inside a store. 50 capsules were distributed among those 8 bottles that were distributed over 5 different stores, all within an hour's drive from each other. It was clear that the contamination had not happened during manufacturing or delivery. Whoever had done this had made the laced capsules themselves. Then, the person bought or stole Tylenol bottles from stores and then slipped them back onto the shelves of stores within driving distance from one another. The bottles were not delivered to the stores where the victims bought them. Instead, they were planted there by the poisoner. The pills were extremely well made, and working with cyanide without killing yourself isn't exactly an amateur job. This guy was very good, possibly a professional chemist or something along those lines. The only store that had CCTV available was the Walgreens where Paula bought her bottle from. Sadly, the camera didn't catch anyone because it was angled away from the front door and the aisle where she'd taken the bottle from. The killer had no specific victim in mind. This was purely done to cause as much random death as possible. A disgruntled Johnson & Johnson's employee, someone interested in tanking the company's stock market value. The theories were all over the place, but even with the FBI on the case, authorities were getting nowhere. But here is a list of suspects that were looked into. A man named James Lewis wrote an extortion letter to the police, threatening to poison more medications if they didn't give him $1 million, but that was a dead end. This piece of work gave them an account number to wire the money to, and that number belonged to another man that Lewis was angry at. Lewis just wanted his ex-best friend to go to jail for 7 murders because the buddy owed him money. Lewis was in New York at the time that the bottles would have been planted in the stores, so it physically couldn't be him. The second suspect was Roger Arnold, who bragged in a car that he had cyanide in his possession and that he was the guy who did it. From the outside, Arnold seemed like a big talker who wasn't very mentally stable, but there were some very suspicious aspects to him that made police look closer. For one, Mary Reiner bought her Tylenol from a store that was located right across the street from the hospital where Arnold's ex-wife was being held, and he and Mary's father had worked together in the past. His ex-wife claimed that he'd given her Tylenol a few months before that made her sick, and he had an inordinate amount of books on crime, warfare tactics, devices, and substances, and instructions on how to make bombs. He worked for a jewelry company that used cyanide during the cleaning process of precious metals, so he knew how to work with the stuff. Arnold had also bought 2 plane tickets to go to Thailand, even though he'd never traveled out of the country in his life. Personally, I don't think it was Arnold. He just didn't have the brains or the discretion that this killer had. Whoever did this planned this long in advance, and Arnold wasn't exactly the type to keep anything to himself. And the close proximity to the store and Reiner's father's place of employment, well, we're not talking about a large radius here. As for the wife, she was hospitalized for a mental condition and wasn't at all a credible witness. But even if he had given her laced pills, dude, she'd be dead, not just mildly sick. Even the most minute amounts of cyanide can kill a horse. Whatever was making her sick enough to take Tylenol was probably the same thing that made her sick after she'd taken it. Then there's Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Look, this is a cool theory. I mean, he definitely had the skills and the brains, but it's still highly unlikely. For one, Kaczynski built bombs, not poison capsules. Secondly, he was extremely targeted in his attacks. He had a purpose. A crazy one, sure, but he focused in on a purpose and a target, whereas the Tylenol killings were designed to be completely random. Different MO, different targets, and different motives. He just doesn't fit. But in 2023, a bombshell announcement was made. One of the bottles, purchased by a woman named Linda Morgan, was brought to police back when the recall was announced. She'd opened the bottle, saw that some of the pills looked funny because the gel casings of the capsules were already starting to break down. Thankfully, she thought the meds had gone bad and decided to take something else for her headache. Anyway, that bottle had male DNA on it that did not match the shop employees where she bought it or the delivery men that delivered it to the store. They tested it against all three of the main suspects, and they got nothing. But they're keeping a lot close to the vest.
I think it's solved. I can't go into that detail because it's not public.
I believe that it's solved.
I think there's sufficient evidence to go forward.
Here's what I think is going to happen. Ran it through CODIS, got no hits, and soon they'll run it through DNA databases, like 23andMe. They're going to try to find a familial match and work their way back up the family tree from there. It's been done before, so it's their best bet. People have serious concerns about governmental access to private collections of civilian DNA, myself included. Hey, I'll wear that tinfoil hat proudly. There's a lot of serious and valid concerns about how much power a government can have over genetic material, but most would argue that this case has enough justification to access those private records. I'm in two minds about this. On one hand, I want the guy to be caught. But on the other, I don't think it's ethical to rummage through people's private genetic information. But what do you think? Which route are police going to go with one small partial DNA sample? And, regardless of how they do it, do you even think it's possible to still catch this monster? As always, I'll leave these questions over to you. So let us know in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe. We have an entire team here bringing you new cases every week. We're reading, we're taking notes, and we appreciate your feedback immensely. And now, I'm off to burn my entire medicine cabinet and spend sleepless nights going over every food item's packaging to check for tampering. Think I'm crazy? Just go Google what Johnson & Johnson's did with their baby powder or Japan's 1985 paraquat murders. I'm telling you, the dangers out there are numerous and terrifying. Sleep tight, I won't. And I'll see you in the next one, people.